Hello friends, today's topic of discussion is Samson Agonistes, written by John Milton. This Samson Agonistes is a tragic closet drama by Milton. It is a drama written in poetic form. It appeared with the publication of Milton's Paradise Regained in 1671. Like Paradise Regained, Samson Agonistes forces on the inner workings of the mind of the protagonist. This emphasis flies in the face of the biblical characterization of Samson in the book of Judges, which celebrates his physical strength. Samson Agonistes is a story of destiny, of heroism, of the fate of a nation and the threat of seduction, and a guy's hair. It is the tragedy of Samson, a once mighty warrior brought low by his own pride and lust. The central theme is redemptive suffering. Another theme is freedom. It has many other themes like religion, suffering, guilt and blame, strength and skill, fate and free will, mortality, marriage, sins, etc. Samson Agonistes is a drama proper, the one classical tragedy in English that stands in conception and texture on a level with those of the Greeks. The massive, sinewy verse is still another kind of classical writing, and the movement has a new kind of expressiveness. The real drama goes on in the soul of the hero, and there is more than Sophoclean irony and ambiguity from the title and the first line to the last chorus. Whatever the similarities that existed between Samson and the poet himself, the result was completely impersonal. Samson, like Christ, resists a series of temptations, but he is a wholly human sinner facing heavier odds, and the process of resistance and regeneration demands the conquest of self and of despair. Now we should focus on the title. Samson is the name of a biblical hero whose exploits and tragic death are narrated in the section of the Old Testament which bears the heading Judges. Samson's story is contained in chapter 13 to 16 of the book of Judges. The Greek word agonistes means a combatant in the games. Thus, the word may also be paraphrased as a wrestler, or a champion, or an athlete, or a contestant in a match. The title of Milton's poem relates chiefly to the last occurrence, which is also the catastrophe of the poem. The catastrophe marks the culminating point of the drama, and it is the catastrophe to which all the earlier episodes of the poem lead. Thus, the appropriateness of the title cannot be questioned. The name Samson means the sun, while the name Manoah means rest. The name of Samson's second wife has variously been spelled Delilah and Delilah. The word Delilah means to hang like a leaf. Thus, this name implies a delicate person. The name Harapha means a giant, and Harapha is, of course, descended from a race of giants. In the preface to Samson Agonistes, Milton gives us his conception of tragedy. Accordingly, he gives to his preface the name like of that sort of dramatic poems, which is called tragedy. The preface is followed by what Milton calls the argument of the poem. Here Milton gives us in a nutshell the theme of subject matter of his dramatic poem. The poem does not begin with an angel's prophecy about the birth of Samson, as does the biblical narrative. Milton's poem begins at the point where Samson, having been captured and blinded, is living as a prisoner in the city of Gaza in Israel. on a day which the Philistines have dedicated to their god Dagon. Samson, like the other prisoners, has been given a holiday in honor of the religious festival, and he sits down at a favorite spot outside the prison and begins to meditate upon his wretched circumstances and the misery which he is undergoing as a prisoner. Here we get a name like Philistines. These Philistines were a people who originally belonged to a country called Crete. They had migrated from their native place and had been able to conquer the local Jewish tribes and had begun to rule them. Another name is Danti. Dan was the name of one of the Jewish tribes of the time. The word Danti therefore means a member of the Jewish tribe known as Dan. Thus Samson is a Danti, as is his father Manoah. The persons constitute the chorus are also Dantis because they belong to the same tribe, namely Dan. Thus, when Manoah comes to meet his son and sees a group of persons belonging to his own tribe, he addresses them thus: brethren and men of Dan. Another name we get here, Canaanite. A Canaanite meant a person belonging to Canaan. Canaan was the name of a country. A Canaanite therefore meant a dweller in Canaan. Another name we get here, the name is Dagon. Dagon was the name of a god worshipped by the Philistines. This god was a kind of monster because in physical appearance he was believed to be half man and half fish. Dagon figures prominently in the poem. The Philistines believed that it was through the help and patronage of Dagon that they had been able to capture their sworn enemy Samson. In order to offer their thanks to Dagon for the favor which he had done to them, the Philistines fixed a particular day as a festival in honor of him. It is on this day, the day of thanksgiving to Dagon, that the incidents of the poem takes place. In the dialogue between Samson and Manoah, it becomes clear that the Jews believed Dagon to be a false god. Samson tells his father that in the contest between the false god Dagon and the true God of Israel, the latter would win a victory, and Manoah agrees. Another term we get here, the term is Nazarite. Samson calls himself a Nazarite. The Bible also describes Samson as a Nazarite. A Nazarite was a person who had taken a vow of purity and austerity. Such a man had to observe certain rules. For instance, he was not to have his hair cut off. He was not even to shave himself. A Nazarite was not to drink wine, and not even to eat grapes from which wines were made. A Nazarite was not expected to go near a dead body. A Nazarite was also not expected to get married or to indulge in any sensual pleasure. Thus, in marrying first the women of Timnah and then Delilah, Samson had broken the vow of Nazarite. In fact, in accordance with the angel's prophecy, Samson was a Nazarite from the very womb. In other words, he was a born Nazarite, though he violated some of the rules which he was expected to observe. Another word we get in this poem, the word is Gentiles. This was a word used for the non-Jewish nations. Another name we get, Sores. Sores was the name of a valley. Delilah was a native of this valley. The valley was a Philistine territory. Another term we get here, Judah. Judah was the name of one of the several Jewish tribes, just as Dan. Another name we get, Beelzebub. This was the name of a god worshipped by the Philistines, just as Dagon was the name of another god worshipped by them. Another term we get here is Hebrew or Hebrew. This was a term used for a Jew. Hebrew is still used in that sense. The story of Samson is contained in chapter 13 to 16 of the book of the Judges in the Old Testament of the Bible. The birth of Samson was prophesied by an angel who comes down to the earth and appeared before the childless wife of a man called Manoah, and who told her that she would soon give birth a child. The angel also directed these women not to allow a razor to come to the child's head, and that the child's hair should never be cut because the child would be a Nazarite from the womb. Furthermore, the angel said that on growing up, this child would begin to deliver Israel from its alien rulers, namely the Philistines. The women gave birth to a child in due course and gave him the name Samson. The child grew up and God blessed him. As a young man, Samson felt attracted by a woman of Timnah and got married to her. On his way to Timnah, Samson encountered an angry lion, and he showed his superhuman strength by tearing the lion into pieces. Samson quarreled with his wife's kinsfolk and killed 30 of the Philistines to give vent to his anger. However, the wife whom he had married was given away to one of his own friends, and he, Samson, was thus deprived of her. These women had not proved faithful to Samson. Samson again gave vent to his wrath against the Philistines, this time by burning their crops. Samson's own countrymen caught hold of Samson and bound him with 2 cords in order to hand him over to the Philistines, to whom he had done great harm. However, these cords were burned by a fire, and Samson became free. He then picked up the jawbone of a dead ass and slew 1,000 Philistines with it. Next, another feat of strength by Samson happened when the Philistines wanted to capture Samson when he went to Giza, but Samson plucked away the gate of the city and also the 2 door posts and went away, carrying them bar and all to a hill near Hebron. Next, Samson married another Philistine woman named Delilah. Next, Samson was betrayed by Delilah, and Samson became a wild prisoner. Delilah then sent for a barber and had Samson's head shorn off its hair. When Samson lay sound asleep, when he woke up, he found that all his strength had gone. Delilah then handed him over to the Philistines, who blinded both his eyes and made him a prisoner in the city of Gaza. Samson had to perform very hard toil every day like the other prisoners. His labor consisted in grinding the corn at the public mill. Milton's poem begins at this very point in the biblical narrative. Later, Samson found an opportunity to take his revenge upon the Philistines. On a day when the Philistines were holding celebrations to honor their god Dagon, Samson was summoned to display his feats of strength before the huge gathering. As Samson's hair had grown afresh on his head and had by now become quite long, his superhuman strength had also returned to him. After displaying a few feats of strength, Samson requested his guide to allow him to lean against the 2 pillars which supported the roof of the building in which sat all the Philistines to watch the celebrations and the games. Samson, using all his strength, shook the 2 pillars, thus bringing down the roof of the building upon the heads of all the people who sat beneath. A large number of Philistines were killed by the falling of the roof, and Samson himself was also killed. It is possible to treat Samson Agonistes as a regular play. divisible into 5 acts. Milton made it clear in the preface to this poem that he did not intend it for the stage, but for the sake of convenience, we can treat the poem as a play. Thus viewed, it may be divided into acts as Act 1 from line number 1 to 325, Act 2 line number from 326 to 710, Act 3 line number 711 to 1060, Act 4 line number from 1061 to 1440, Act 5 line number from 1441 to 1758. By writing Samson Agonistes, Milton finally produced the biblical tragedy which he had long ago proposed as the kind of literature to be encouraged in the Christian society. Its form is that of Greek tragedy, Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus and Aeschylus' Prometheus Bound serve as models for it. A Greek tragedy on a biblical theme may be regarded as Milton's final way of reconciling his Christianity with his humanism. Once again, he takes up the theme of temptation and the trials to which a good man could be subjected. But he chooses as his hero, this time not a perfect man, but a man guilty of human weakness. Samson had long been regarded in Christian tradition as a hero and a saint. The story of Samson developed at the end of generations of medieval ecclesiastical and other writers as a tragedy in the medieval sense, an account of a great man, a saint, a counterpart of Hercules, a type of Christ who falls from happiness to misery. And in non ecclesiastical texts, he appears as a great man who fell through weakness, his foolish love and trust of a bad woman. Renaissance poets developed the medieval view of Samson as a great man brought low by his trust in a faithless woman. His weakness was lust or passion or imprudence or all the three. The characters are Samson, Delilah his wife, Messenger, Manoah the father of Samson, Harpha of Gath, Chorus of Dainties, public officers. The scene is in before the prison in Gaza. Samson made captive, blind, and now in the prison of Gaza. Samson had been betrayed by his wife Delilah and had been taken prisoner by the Philistines. He had been shorn of his hair, wherein his strength had resided. The action opens on a day of festival which the Philistines are celebrating and in honor of which the prisoners have been given a holiday from the odorous labor which they otherwise have to perform every day. As it is a holiday for Samson also, he goes out of the prison to spend some time alone to meditate upon his present wretched condition. He is fled from the prison to a place outside by a boy. The poem begins with a soliloquy from Samson. Samson was visited by Harpha of Gath. Harpha is a giant who wants to meet the warrior who might have been a worthy opponent in battle. Samson challenges Harpha to a fight. Harpha claims that Samson's strength is sourced from magic, but Samson insists that it is from the Israelites' God. He claims God is stronger than Dagon, and Harpha points out that God left Samson to his enemies. Harpha says he will not sink so low as to fight Samson. So Samson tells Harpha he is a coward. Harpha leaves, and the chorus worries that he will cause trouble for Samson by going to the governors. A public officer arrives to bring Samson to the festival to prove Dagon's greatness, but Samson refuses. saying it would be against the rules of the Hebrew Bible. The officer leaves, and the chorus predicts a visit from another messenger. When the second officer arrives, Samson agrees to go. Manoah arrives to tell chorus that he has paid a ransom for Samson and hopes it will earn his release. Shouts are heard from the city where the festival is taking place. The chorus is certain that Samson is exacting some horrible revenge on Philistines and wonders if God has restored his vision. Another messenger appears and says, though Gaza still stands, Samson has killed many of the Philistines. He pulled down the temple on them and himself. Samson has died. Only the peasants survive because they were not standing under the roof. The chorus praised Samson's vengeance and says the Philistines brought their own destruction because they were intoxicated by both wine and idolatry. They were blind on the inside. The chorus adds, while Samson's inner sight was virtuous. Manoah promises to hold a funeral for Samson to honor his bravery. The chorus concludes that humans do not always know God's plan, but they may be consoled by God's victory. Friends, this is in short about Samson Agonistes. Thank you. Hope to see you in the next video.